Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. Today I'm joined by Noah Kaplan, founder and CEO of Leon Speakers in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Noah is a bit of a legend in the CEDIA professional installation channel, but he is also one of the most creative people in the business. It's been a while since we've chatted, because of the global pandemic and all, so I thought it'd be a great time to catch up and see what's going on at Leon up the road from me here in the Midwest. Noah, thanks for joining us today.
Jeremy, so nice to see you, at least like this. Thanks for the super kind introduction, all too kind. And it's a pleasure to be here today on Residential Tech.
Yeah, well, I guess your legend, which is a bit of a nightlife legend at different events, precede you because yesterday you did have a virtual version of that. Is that correct?
That was a really cool event that just kind of came together quickly. We did a virtual beer tasting where we shipped beer to some of the best dealers in the country, known as the Guild Group. Super creative, incredible group of dealers that share a common ethos. Ship them brand new fresh beers that we've been making at the brewery.
Nice.
And we had a virtual tasting, which went really well and really long. So last night, yes, it was a late night. I remember going to bed well into the AMs.
See, and I've been worried about you with your extroverted personality being sort of quarantined, and you figured out a way to be safe, but yet still have a little bit of a party late into the night with your industry friends. That's awesome.
Well, what's cool is I noticed even early on that all of us were connecting with all of our friends early on and reconnecting with friends. And I looked back at some of the old pictures that I would snap at the screen, and I think I went through like 3 or 4 personas. I mean, there were certain times where I was like, was I wearing a costume for that thing, or what was going on there? So, and now you should see what I'm working in now. I'm trying to work on like, what does life look like now? And so I'm right now working on like an upright standing version of a Zoom station because I'm very jittery. I don't like sitting down a lot. This is the first time I've ever sat at a desk for this amount of time.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, you've been to our place.
Yeah. You're an energetic dude, so I totally get it. And speaking of which, I was there, and one of my great memories just a couple falls ago was taking a trip up to Ann Arbor. I think it was a fall break for my kids, so they had a couple of days off from school. So we love Michigan. We hadn't been to Ann Arbor, heard great things about the college town, and I knew that if I was there, I had to see you guys. And so we had a little tour with you, but what the great thing was that you gave the tour to my kids. And I just thought that was amazing. I videoed the whole thing just because I needed to look like I was doing something important. But you gave the kids like full attention, didn't talk down to them. You gave them, the explanation of what you did in a way that was interesting to them. They still wear the shirts that they got there, they're like, probably that's their only connection to what I do is having the tour of your facility. I mean, how important is it that you have that kind of a company culture? I know now it's hard because it's all virtual, but in the normal days, how much time did it take to kind of cultivate that feeling of bringing people in and having it different than other places?
Well, I want to address, first of all, going back, having you and your family, your daughters, that was so amazing. It's one of those, I love when kids come into tour because I think I don't remember looking back in my life, a time when I actually got to go and see what any business does. My father was a doctor. I went to his office every now and then. You don't really get it's not a tour, right? It was kind of scary.
Sure.
So even as a young person, you really had no visuals into what it's like to run a business. What does a business look like? What do the workers look like? What does a craftsman shop look like? And so to me, it's so important when we bring kids in, they're so creative and they have so many, we have lots of visual cues all around that kind of represent our culture. We have art and artifacts and music playing. And I remember she was looking at all these strange objects that we have, vintage radios, and asking amazing questions. What is this? How to do that? And it sort of reminds you and prompts you like, oh yeah, this is why we need to reintroduce people into how companies work at an early age. And for me, it's like one of the highlights. Before COVID, I was doing probably 3 to 5 tours a week at least. And it always energizes me, and it gives me a connection to the people I'm working with, but it also keeps everything moving for me. So even now, I'm always rearranging the walls, looking for new strange objects. I should bring some in that I just found. I'm really into very specific early vintage objects right now, that I could show you later if I could run right over there. But the best part about the experience from a tour perspective is, we make a lot of products, and we've been making products for 20 years. And I think until you come here, you don't really see why we're making the products. And so when you walk the halls of Leon, I mean, everybody at Leon, our number one core value is creativity. So most of the people that are working here are artists and engineers and musicians and craftspeople. Everyone's super curious, and everyone's also multidisciplinary. So it's not like someone who's answering the phone is somebody who was born to just answer phones.
Yeah.
I believe that everybody should have passions and side interests, and that work is not your only defining characteristic. You have to have a life outside of work, and you have to bring that life inside. So we also like people to show what is their personality about.
Mm-hmm.
And so my personality, I'm obsessed with collecting vintage artifacts, from 1880 all the way up to 1980. I love the vintage boom boxes as much as I love those strange magic lanterns and psyopticons and strange objects that we were making in the 1800s that sort of formed how this industry was born. And I think the culture comes from showing people what you love. So there's a lot of fancy ways that companies talk about culture and how you gain culture. And I think culture only comes from drive and desire, and really being able to express yourself and be clear about what you're expressing. So at Leon, everything that's here is sort of an expression of our vision, which is the mixture and the intersection between art and audio and design and technology. And behind the scenes of all that, the real one for me is how business and bohemia mix.
Okay. What's that mean?
Well, business and bohemia to me, like, I was an artist that happened to start a business. It wasn't something I was always born as an artist. I was a working artist. And so I started designing products. I just started designing things. I never expected to start a business. And no one really talks about that. So when we talk about mixing business bohemia, I still like to live artist life. So to me, this entire place is a studio. It's a craftsman house. It's where we're making things. And ultimately, my greatest joy and my greatest love in the world is to create. Mm-hmm. And so to me, creativity is our number one core value. And creativity to me is an action word, right? Creativity to me means create your face off. Never stop, be prolific, never stop trying to get better. And so everything that we find, all the objects in the building and on the walls, and all the people here represent everything that we represent as a business, which is all about creating stuff that has to do with art and audio and design. And there's just so much to do. And now, of course, it's a little quiet around here.
Sure.
But by no means have we stopped digging into the culture and digging into how we could change and get better every single day.
So how do you put that in a nutshell when you're talking to somebody you've never met and they ask you, what is your company? Because in a press release, you say that you're a soundbar company maybe, but that doesn't even come close. And I forgot about that, actually. I don't even think of your company as a soundbar company, but that was a big part of what you did for a while, was crafting things that were artistic around soundbars, so they blended into the environment or became a little art piece in the home. And then you came up with like wall sculptures and things. Mm-hmm. It's all back to audio though, right? That's their main focus.
It's all steeped in audio and in design and in bringing really high-end custom audio into normal places in your house.
Yeah.
I always thought about design, being a musician, which is what I did at night. I was full-time artist during the day, played music by night. I saw designing for audio changing. And so we always designed around objects or products that had natural placement in a room where you'd want sound, like in front of a screen.
Right.
So, when we're trying to describe what we do, our thing is more about, we take a creative approach towards designing audio products.
Okay.
Right. So I didn't like when flat screen TVs came out, I was really interested in what that was going to do to the industry as a whole. This was very early on. This is right out of college. And this was maybe, late 90s, mid 90s when I started looking at this. But at that time, we were all studio musicians and we were mostly building studio monitors.
Mm.
So we learned a lot about audio. We learned what we loved in terms of tonality and sound. We also learned what we hated.
Mm.
And what I really didn't like was sort of the lack, when we were trying to buy stuff at this time is, late 90s, not a great time for design. Everything had kind of moved overseas. A lot of just standard, like, watch this. If I was to mention the word speakers, and I do this in a lot of talks, like, think about what you see in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that everybody is seeing those same black little boxes that we call speakers. And to me, that's like just not where we can go with this. It's so rudimentary. And to me, music is such an important part of your personality. I want to transform and work on that forever. What can it look like? Where can we place sound? So it's more about an approach. But still, we make high-end custom audio products for luxury and residential spaces. That's sort of what we do.
Yeah.
Why we do it will never change. Our vision has always been the same. And that vision is backed up by the mission of Leon, which is balanced by design. So it's not necessarily about speakers, our approach. It's about your life and what you're doing and what is the best possible way to approach a situation. And actually, we love problem solving. Right. Mm-hmm. So balanced by design, the reason we created a soundbar, because when I was looking at possible ways to make a television work well or look good, people used to put big speakers around the TV, and then they'd have a clunky center channel underneath it. And in New York, where we were designing at the time, mostly it was New York City, products from New York City was, people were ripping out those gigantic CRT televisions, and they'd have these enormous gaps and spaces in their cabinetry.
Yeah.
And I started getting calls and we'll get back into the history of how that all happened. But most of the time, it's about streamlining the design, understanding the science, and then designing into that solution set. So yeah, it's hard to describe to anybody exactly what we do.
Right.
But we talk about it like the most boiled down way is, we try to add sound and style to your space, period.
Nice. So let's back up then and talk about, a little bit about your upbringing. You were just an artistic kid growing up. Your dad's a doctor. You're a Jewish kid. You didn't get pushed into being a doctor or a lawyer somehow. Your parents were open-minded enough to say, this is an artistic kid, let's let him be an artist. Is that kind of how it goes, or did you just fight it?
It was interesting. I think I was very lucky at an early age to have a thing. You always hope your kid has a thing. I was born as an artist, I believe. I didn't know. I was a working artist. My belief is, and I was lucky to have talent at it. At a very early age, I was in the PACE programs, and so my parents believed in it, and they're super creatives as well. My father is a folk artist.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
he has a show up right now at the University of Michigan. At 79 years old, he has his first solo exhibition. Nice. Which is such like an amazing point for me to see as his son being, a middle-aged guy now. Yeah. So proud to see him highlighting his work. His work always mesmerized me. I mean, so folky and free. Me, I was a truly studied artist. I studied art for so long in art history, and I studied with amazing people and teachers. I learned traditional art from anatomy up, all the bones, all the skeletal muscles, how they all relate to your face, how to build a portrait, how to build a scene, how to compose. And a lot of people, it's best to never learn that. And a lot of time, Picasso always talks about, how do you unlearn that?
Sure.
So yeah, from an early age, they accepted me as an artist, and I worked hard as an artist. So, even from, doing commercial and selling art since I've been 14 or 15 years old. And how I got here is the more bizarre story.
Okay.
Upbringing wise, because I also went to University of Michigan for art school, but I was a scholar athlete. I loved, I was a wrestler, didn't wrestle at the U of M, but I was a scholar athlete from before. So I always like to be fit for the job, because to me, art is physical too. I now do live art, which you've seen me do live paintings.
Yes. But
the reason I got into this whole thing was because music was always the power or the fuel to the whole fire.
Okay.
And
yeah. So getting up to speed with Leon then, and you're at the University of Michigan. You were in
Mm-hmm.
New York prior to that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where you grew up, right?
Yep. I grew up in Merrick, Long Island, and
Okay.
born in Manhattan. And then it was just a really interesting time to be, and I'll explain that later. But yeah, when I went to U of M, there was so much transitional technology going on. I started meeting so many engineers. I started playing music with people. I switched from being a music fan to start learning to play guitar and music. We met like an incredibly talented group of people at the time. So Leon started to form, but it was a really organic form.
Okay.
It was like, just like today, it was a group of artists and musicians. We had houses together. We had 3 houses next to each other. We had like more recording gear than you could ever imagine. And we were building guitars. We had a pirate radio station. We were kind of just a renegade group of freaks. And we got completely obsessed with everything sound.
Okay.
And it was making music. It was recording strange sounds, interviewing people. I don't know if you ever see what a pirate radio station looks like or how it runs, but, we had a PVC tube that was on top of our house.
Oh my God.
That was like 30 feet. We got in trouble for it,
Okay.
I had 2 brilliant partners who were my business partners at the time, and they were also similar, very different times. But yeah, so from there, we just started designing stuff very quickly at an early age. And I actually worked with the University of Michigan to formulate the business plan for Leon speakers, which was all about creating sound for these new things called flat panel TVs.
Okay.
Why that? I don't even remember why we were so. I think I met Kevin Zarro from Marantz at our studio. We had a sound studio downtown in Ann Arbor. After college, I stayed, and I actually got a job drawing portraits for the University of Michigan. I had to draw all the scholar athletes throughout history of University of Michigan. And that's why I actually stayed in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
So that is one of the root causes why I stayed in Michigan at all. Because I was hoping obviously to get back to New York City, which I loved as an artist, because I was still a full-blown freakishly obsessed artist at that time. And so I got that commission. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to stay. I had this group of friends. We were playing music. We had a band at the time called The Still. My brother was in the band. And honestly, this whole whirlwind of stuff is just the same now. It just kept growing into a larger snowball, meeting more and more people, more engineers, and really any design opportunity that came to us, we jumped on it.
Okay.
One of our first designs that we created was called Picture Sound in 1995. This is just us drawing, like how I still draw, every single drawing this day is just still drawn.
Yeah.
And we actually brought it to life, and we filed patents on it, and we got a studio. We started making stuff, and we learned from a frame maker how to make skinny speakers, and we learned from the Germans how to make thin speakers, and we learned from the French how to find awesome tweeters and parts and components, and we learned from a guy from MIT who we met who worked with Edmure Bose how to design speakers.
Wow. And
so to me, my luck has to do with an approach also, which is like, I like to just be naive. I like to meet experts. I don't need to be the expert of all the things. I like to dig in as deep as possible. My nature is to get obsessed. And so I completely got obsessed with designing speakers and audio. And my first thing I designed as a group together was this Picture Sound product. We even filed the patents with hand drawings.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the one thing we learned was that, flat panel speakers were something that you can do. You can do it very, there was a lot of technology to be able to make thin speakers.
Okay.
Wasn't a whole lot of technology to make it implementable, but really bizarre history all there.
Yeah. So just briefly, and then I need to go to a break, but what's the actual product then for that first picture speaker? What's it look like?
The first product looked a lot like our Ente pieces now, which was a flat panel speaker that had interchangeable art that was all silk screened or custom printed.
Okay.
It was a little bit ahead of its time, and I don't think we realized at the time. I didn't even know what a dealer was. So I'm talking now about this industry. I didn't know about industry. I was just like, oh, this is cool. Let's make this. Let's make a lot of this.
Right.
Then when we first heard about a trade show, so our first products that we rolled out were called Picture Sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have them around. People still call and ask about them
Oh my God.
often. And that led to us making flat panel speakers for TVs, ultimately for a call from big companies like Marantz and Fujitsu to design speakers for their displays at the time.
Okay. All right.
Why don't
Well,
we cut to a break and
yeah. So we will continue our conversation with Noah Kaplan here in a minute, but first a quick word from our sponsor.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Residential Tech Talk. Today's show is brought to you by Why Reboot. Why Reboot specializes in creating commercial-grade networks that address the demand of advanced control and automation technologies for residential, commercial, and luxury marine environments. Why Reboot systems are comprised of the best gear in the industry, including the Paramount Access Point Mount, developed for integrators and interior designers. To learn more, go to whyreboot.com and accesspointmount.com.
Welcome back. I'm talking to Noah Kaplan at Leon Speakers. So Noah, we were talking about your first products, and then you get rolling. You go to a CEDIA. What was that like for a company that had no idea that this industry even existed?
That is an amazing question. If I showed you the picture, first of all, I had dreadlocks about 4 foot down my back.
I didn't meet you then, because I would
Yeah, you
remember
did not
that.
meet me then. I did not look like this old guy. I brought my friend from the Bronx, Frankie, and I brought, we built this handmade setup. We drove there with me, Jeff Gordon, my business partner at the time, and Frankie, who was a really good salesperson and designer.
And what year is this?
This is 97, maybe 98, 99. I'm not good with time.
Which city was it?
It was Indianapolis.
Okay. Yep.
So we drove up to the RCA Dome. We built all this stuff out of doors. We signed up for the show. We had never been to a trade show. I can't even believe you asked this. I'm sorry for being wordy too, but it's hysterical. Like, we literally got in a van, packed up all this stuff, and we drove there. And we show up at this gigantic stadium, and we're like, what the hell? So
Yeah.
we drive up to the door, and we just start unloading the van, and all these union guys are like, yo, stop. And we're like, yo, what? Like, we got kind of mad, and they're like, you can't unpack your stuff. We're like, what? What do you mean we can't unpack? They're like, yeah, you have to pay drayage and all. We're like, what? So I remember being so mad that we had to pay somebody to our booth. We could see it, and we had to pay them like.
I think that's an experience by so many manufacturers and so many industries. It just, yeah.
But we were so young. We were all in our early 20s. I was maybe 23 or 20. So it was beyond bizarre for me.
Yeah.
Just had no clue what I was doing. And then when we show up, we're next to like Microsoft. They had built like a castle with 900 rooms, and there's people running around in corporate outfits. And I remember we had this bizarre little booth right next to him with all these weird art speakers. And but I'll tell you what, we were in like one of those random areas that we got lucky. A lot of people were like, who are you guys? And what the hell are you doing here? And the truth is, we didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I remember it was funny. It was definitely past your hair phase there with the dreads, but a salesperson on my magazine asking me what I thought of you guys. I'm like, I don't know what to think of those guys yet. You guys are just so hyperkinetic and like scared me as an introvert. I'm like, I don't know. They're just like all over the place. But then, you settle in and you got this great ad campaign and you start really like creating an image, that and reputation that was really cool. So, and then it took me a while to be able to meet you and get to know you. But what would you say were some of the early successes for the company that got you sort of established in this industry that you didn't really even know about?
I think it goes back to the curiosity. Like, the approach was, it was kind of naive, frankly. And I realized at a certain point that asking what people need was the way to figure out what we should do. Mm-hmm. So I was never one of those people who was like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And I'm just not ego driven, but in that way, when it comes to audio products, I really just I like being a commissioned artist. I was a commissioned artist by trade. So to me, the same persona came for audio. So I learned how to ask questions, like to the dealers or the people who were asking questions. Well, this is what we have, but are you interested in this?
Yeah.
So I never was trying to pitch anybody. I was just kind of trying to learn from them what they wanted. And I really feel like the dealers directed us into what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you a dealer in New York City, when we brought Picture Sound there, pivotal moment, we brought Picture Sound, like literally drove to New York City like we used to with the band. We were there all the time, and go into like a fancy store, one of the top end stores, I won't name them.
Okay.
And we showed him the Picture Sound product. And he kind of looks at it and he's kind of like, he looks at us, he's like, well, that's the dumbest blanket product I've ever seen. Because what? I can see where you can go with this. I'm like, say more, you know? So we just kind of listened and listened.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you know, we said, but look, there's a flat panel TV up in your store. And at that time, these were very expensive things.
Yeah.
They were mostly selling on the coast. They were $25,000, $50,000 objects.
Sure.
We're like, look, all these towers and giant speakers you have, I'm like, they're going on the wall. Everything's going to change. And he actually gave us a shot. He said, look, these other picture things, not for me. He's like, but if you could make it work with this TV and make that sound on the TV better, you might have something. So we literally went back to Ann Arbor and scrapped the plans. You know,
so you kind of evolved into having, you're framing up the whole thing. You're putting the TV, and it's almost back to what you're saying with those cabinets that no longer fit a tube TV, and you fill the space with something, but now you're creating the frame, you're putting the speakers in there along the sides or below, and you've got the TV inside, and it becomes like a furniture piece on the wall as opposed to just this piece of electronics.
Well, what's interesting is that what I noticed is, as a designer too, because I've always loved industrial design and product and furniture design, is that we did something really weird as an industry. If you look back at American history, starting from companies like RCA, Victrola, all the early, Philco, all these early companies, they were amazing technology designers. You know, a Philco TV, and we talk about this, like I remember talking to your daughter about this. You know, when the Philco TV that's right at the front of our place, you know, you look at it, it's a beautiful object in itself.
Mm-hmm.
It had a beautiful speaker on the bottom. It has an amplifier built into it. It's got speakers built into it. It has wireless radio. And you can tune in. It's a beautiful screen, a beautiful image, a CRT. It's all handmade. And what we did was we kind of blew all those pieces and parts apart over the course of the last 40 or 50 years.
Yeah.
You know, this is when we lost track of craftsmanship. I believe we lost track of design. We moved, you know, from custom markets to mass markets, which is, you know, I know why. And it's good, you know, it's because we love to consume media in this country and we need to do it at mass. But there was a way, even back then, to consume it with style. And so I always felt like my job was to put everything back together and make it look cohesive and normal and make you feel like you could live with it. Because if you even look at an object, like right now, we're talking on these things that to me still don't look good at all. I love the look of an apple, but I'm like, that's a good first step. You know, what else can we do to make this better? Americans look at screens all the time. So it's a focal point in your house. In fact, it's probably the focal point of the house. Like, it's not a fireplace anymore.
Yeah.
So the way I meander into design is just by being like, whoa, that's not that cool. You know, even when I see how a TV was hanging on the wall back then, I used to use the speakers just to hide the ugly sides that you would see, all these brackets and wires and blinky lights behind it, and just no other appliances or objects work that way.
Yeah.
And so actually, I think the biggest evolution, one of the biggest problems, is putting technology on a wall. It causes a lot of issues. So you're going to see some new things coming out soon, because just like we were thinking about what was happening back then when things were going on the wall, I'm starting to think about new thoughts. How can we make things more artistic? Where are people hanging out? Screens have moved. We're watching screens in front of our face. We're here, there. We're in the gym. Where are the new applications? And on the commercial side, we've already started designing a gigantic palette of new products that are for what I'm talking about now. You know, stand-up video conferencing, walking around, huddle spaces, speakers and sculptures that can hang over your head, you know, integrated objects. And so integrated objects were like normal back in the, even if you think about a boombox, it's like a component rack with some speakers attached to it and a handle.
Right.
You know, and it makes sense. And I felt like we went from making sense as an industry to really people started not get it anymore.
So
I don't want to say that.
In terms of what you're currently, I mean, because your latest product introduction sort of tagged off of the Frame TV, which was such a successful and beautiful product. Still is a thing hanging on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
It's still clearly a TV, but when you turn it on, you make it into a picture.
Yeah.
It makes art, which is great, and it's so thin that it's hard to even realize it's not a TV. And so you came up with a great pairing with the speaker below, right?
Oh,
so,
yeah.
So that's still in the older way of thinking, but this new thing that you're talking about is more to do with the zoomification of our lives right now. Is that what you're saying? Or
There's two angles that we're working on. One is kind of like the furniture angle when it comes to, like, I love the Frame TV. We just came out with Frame Bar.
Yeah.
I actually love the Frame TV as just a beautiful picture, like a beautiful TV. It's just so clean and it's flush against the wall. I always wanted our speakers to be clean and flush against the wall, kind of a Norwegian style, simple, where you get to choose the wood, choose your fabric, and make a speaker that you're not embarrassed to see.
Yeah.
And that's what happened really when I think, the reason why we created architectural speakers was in-ceiling speakers, because it was a reaction to people not liking how they looked in their homes, and we don't talk about that a lot, right? They're invisible speakers, very cool. But what else in your house is invisible? As a designer, I don't want to design invisible that much.
Yeah.
I want you to be proud of what you own, so when we're designing for a TV, if it's going to be a soundbar, we just came out with another product called Denza, which is short, obviously a thin credenza that hangs on your wall.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to create things that you could look at, that complement what you're looking at or contrast what you're looking at.
Okay. Contrast
is harder to understand if you're not a designer, or an art person, but sometimes right now it could be built to match. Is calm. It allows you to look. We want you to focus on the image. We don't, when you're watching TV, you don't want to be thinking about the things around you.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I always liked everything to be lean, clean, perfect right on your TV. No shiny things, no logos, no nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Devoid of distraction. And then I wanted to add the style back, because I was like, where's the natural elements going to be brought into? So the Edge Media Frame, for instance, now you get to choose your sound, you get to choose your fabric, and you get to choose your frame style.
Mm-hmm.
So again, what we're trying to do is just create the illusion of simplicity, even though that's kind of not what we have right now. You need 25 apps to make the thing run, a box full of like remote controls that you have to throw in the garbage. And then when it comes to the other products, they are really about creating new telephones, right? This is a telephone. And so to me, I'm like, what is a cool, what's that look like?
Mm-hmm.
What does the modern phone booth look like? And you see in commercial, a lot of people taking a stab at this. But for me, I'm actually starting to really embrace this kind of time travel,
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I want to make this great now. I like this style. I like how this is going. Like, it was great to travel for thousands of days in my life, but it's also great to kind of sit down and draw again. And hang out with you like this,
Sure.
And so I'm trying to lean into it. And I know a lot of people, it's fatiguing, it's annoying, it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
Those are great problems for a designer. How do we make it less fatiguing, less annoying, more fun? And that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in designing for where people are.
Right. Good. Something to look forward to for sure. And I know we've touched on the global pandemic and changes with COVID just in general, but are you finding that you're able to connect this virtual way still with your dealers? You did your beer tasting, which is a great idea. You're not at the different trade shows, you're not at the buying groups. So what's that new world been like for you as a business owner, as a manufacturer?
I think that it's been so interesting talking to people in a new way. For me. It's completely moved away from talks about products or pitching products or things. And I think people know what Leon stands for. They know what we do. They'll get the information they need. If I'm really excited about something, I will call a person. I'm not going to call and say hey, check out this new thing. It's going to be hey, what are you doing? What do you need from me? Because you realize how deep the partnership is between you and your friends and customers. The customers over 20 years become good friends. Right. And so, having those conversations and digging deeper into more what do you actually do? who actually are you? What are you into? Like forget about all this product stuff that we always get so caught up in it. Usually when people come to a trade show, the first question they say is,
what's new?
What's new?
Yeah.
And I learned to not answer that question anymore.
Okay.
There's always going to be new. Leon's, but it's, it's always fun to talk about what's new. I'm not saying pushing that aside, but
yeah.
There's a lot of things that we have to rely on as contractors that work together. The new things are always fun. They're shiny. We're always going to talk about them. But the other thing is, how are you?
Yeah.
What's going on with you? How's your business? And so I feel like the conversation became deeper, like learned really a lot about other people's visions and missions and where how they were brought up. Who are they? Seeing their family in the background, seeing like what I look at behind you, I could learn a lot about you,
Right.
So,
I mean, that's an interesting observation that I picked up too. And, you do miss that human connection when you're in person, but you do have an agenda. We're always busy. We're running to the next thing when we're at these events, but here it's a very like structured intimacy almost, you're like really connecting, and there's fewer distractions, I would think, while you're doing it,
Yeah. And me, I'm like a squirrel, like, I am like, what, like, so it's really not, it's pretty good for me to actually communicate and be calm, and I feel calm. Completely miss as an extreme extrovert. My energy doubles, triples, which might not be a good thing all the time in talking to introverts. And I will say, Jeremy, that 90% of the people I work with are introverts.
Okay.
But like last night, we trailed that call for maybe 3.5 or 4 hours.
Wow.
I was walking, I was showing things from the curio cab, like bringing new weird stuff. We were pouring drinks together. You can't do that and then still learn more about people. So, and then the other thing was how amazing the reaction was here from all of our workers and our team. The team here at Leon, this is a hard job. Our thing is we don't take ourselves that seriously, but we take the products that we're sending you seriously.
Yeah.
And the craftsmen here are amazing. And that group during COVID, there was a time when the factory was completely shut down. It was just me and Ethan and Linda in finance at this enormous, 40,000 square feet of barren land. And that was a lot.
Well, and you knew early on how serious everything was because of your dad. And explain what your dad's background is, because I don't think a lot of people know about this, and I found out just a couple days ago and was amazed.
Yeah, my dad is an incredible person. My whole life, he's a scientist and a researcher, and is a specialist, and he was chief of infectious diseases at Northshore University in New York. And he's just a real scientist. He worked with teams from all over the world, including Robert Gallo. And, he went to school, by the way, he went to Cornell with Tony Fauci. They're in the same class. I grew up seeing Tony. I grew up seeing Bob Redfield. The people you see on TV, they're all my dad's age. They're all friends. It's amazing that these guys are still like the height and they're such intellectual powerhouses.
Yeah.
But early on in my life, my father, who's not only an infectious disease doctor, he was a researcher, and they stumbled upon what was to be known as the first version of HIV. So my father was collecting all these bloods from all these sick patients. And I remember this so vividly in my childhood. Blood, my dad's, he didn't know what was going on with these patients. Him and a group of other scientists, he kept sending it to Bob Gallo, who's an amazing scientist as well and doctor. They started to identify this. And HIV, of course, they were identifying AIDS. So they all had discovered the AIDS virus. And that really changed the trajectory of all of our lives. AIDS in New York was very, very scary, dangerous, serious. Nobody knew how you got it. They didn't know how you transmitted it. There was so much oppression based on it. Doctors were getting it from needle sticks. We had friends that had it. Early, this was, and my dad, we had blood. It was in my refrigerator.
Wow.
And, so really interesting to be brought up around that, and a lot of sadness and a lot of things that you see today.
Yeah.
So from an early age, I learned to take things very, when it comes to health and human health, and also just like being empathetic and understanding how hard it is when new diseases come up, how long it takes science to catch up to that.
Sure.
They figure it out and they work forever, and it's a tireless, endless thing. So yeah, it's been amazing. So when we first heard about this, we kind of an inside angle that this was not going to be good. After ISE, I came back. I can't believe we were all at ISE. That was in what, February, right? This year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the Israelis were like, hey, wake up now. Don't go in that bill. And I was like, what do you mean? We're hearing some completely different reports in the US. Finally, when it came back and all the scientists started catching up to it, my father came in and actually did lectures here at Leon. I never heard the word social distance. And he made the first meeting. He made it a social distance meeting. This is before anybody was talking about that or teaching you how viruses like this are transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out he was not only right, but all the science was right, that we do know how it's transmitted. And he spoke specifically how dangerous, after we learned about how to respond to this, which was, taking all the precautions we talk about, working on keeping everybody apart, all this important information. We then learned later that COVID pneumonia was a really serious problem, and the part of your lungs that it attacks. So my father actually did lectures for our dealers all throughout those early times of COVID when it was really freaky.
Yeah.
And so especially hitting so hard in New York, we saw firsthand, we had people's friends and parents dying and nobody knew what to do. It was like serious times. It still is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt like having my father as a pilot was so important during this time. And I still realize now, when I wake up every single day, when I wake up here and healthy and everybody's around me, I'm good.
Right.
You gain a lot of perspective during this
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely.
I'm super blessed and happy to be here as a person. And obviously I love everything we do. I love what we do. And I get to work with my family still. So my dad moved from New York around the block when I had my kids. So, it's great to have my whole family here too during this, because a lot of people, they're not together.
I know that's the hardest part for a lot of us. Yeah.
It sucks. And I feel so much, just like back then, it was the same. There's so much hardship,
Absolutely. Well, I don't want to end on a note that we're all feeling right now, which is, a little bit of confusion and dismay, but you are doing something coming up here called Leon Live. Can you explain what your goals are there with this new channel and how you're going to premiere it?
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, that's the other side. I forgot all about. Right. This experience here, face to face, we've had the Leon Loft. We have in our manufacturing facility, we have the Leon Loft, which you've been to.
Yes.
And so, the thing I miss most is being able to have the artists and musicians and the people and all those moments that we shared. That was such a big part of our identity and culture.
Right.
7 years of live shows, and most amazing artists. So one day I was about halfway through this, I'm like, this is going to be going on for a while. So we decided to build a broadcast studio upstairs.
Okay.
And I've always wanted to take Leon live at scale, right? How can we show people this world? It's hard to see what it means when we build a custom speaker for you every single day. Hundreds of products being handcrafted. And so the vision is really to show what it's like at the factory, to do virtual walkthroughs, and then to create a new Leon Loft experience. So we finally got this whole rig built. We transformed the Leon Loft into Leon Live, which now has PTZ cameras, it'll have 3 special camera angles and position, all that can be done remote control. So we could patch in others, full scale broadcast capabilities and mixing boards, editing boards. And we're kicking off the first show next week. And it is with an amazing individual who just actually this young artist named Devin Gilfinian, who is a loft artist.
Okay.
During this time, the musicians talk about transitional issue. What do you do?
Yeah.
Their lives are completely upside down. He was one of the top touring artists, no tour, no revenue stream.
Mm.
So they had to pivot as fast as everybody. And they did. They decided to record an album. They decided to record What's Going On front to back.
Amazing.
Yeah. And, Devin's also super politically active. Amidst COVID, of course, now you have a million other issues coming up.
Right.
That we need to address as well.
Yeah.
And so, He's social, yeah, and they're serious. But the first kickoff of Leon will be releasing, talking to Devin. First of all, hopefully we'll get to hear him play a song, Talk to Devin, from Nashville. And then we're actually going to release the song live on Facebook and other platforms like YouTube. But it's going to be a global release of that album that's syndicated by a group of other syndicates like us.
Okay.
So it'll hit the market hard. And it's crazy because Rolling Stone, like the Rolling Stone top albums just came out, and What's Going On is #1.
Oh my gosh.
So like we're anticipating a lot, and just like it was an opportunity, and were we ready? No. Are we ready? You got to be able to be ready when the opportunity arises, and so we're jumping. So yeah, we'll be recording next week, and so
so just to be clear on that, we're probably going to be posting around that time. So it's October 1st, is that correct? Okay, great. So we'll definitely want to help promote that and check in when that goes live, because that sounds awesome. I love that album. It's timeless. I mean, it's like a time capsule, but it's timeless at the same time. It's just amazing.
That's well said.
Well, I really look forward to that. And it's been amazing catching up with you, Noah. Thanks for taking the time to chat today.
Hey, thanks for listening. And always great talking to you. You always bring out, the deeper stories I don't expect to be talking about, which is great. So appreciate everything you do, Jeremy, and hope you and yours are well.
Also, thanks to everybody for joining us. Be sure to comment, share, or subscribe to the podcast. And you can check out all the latest residential tech news at restechtoday.com. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist to residential tech. Home automation, smart device, home or smart house.